If you want to think about oral histories and you want to know about oral histories, then you don't need to be way back in the back. You can come a little closer because this room is about a third full. I got interested in oral history through Kim Beeson and Suzanne Davis, and joined the Historical Society in 2011, been on the board 2 terms, have walked the length of the Grand Canyon from Lee's Ferry to Pierce Ferry. It took me 40 years to do it, longer than Bob Packard. Sorry. These people that measure this stuff are like, oh yeah, my head hurts. So it's been an incredible journey. My wife and I run Vishnu Temple Press. We are sponsors of this event. The books about the cemetery, the books about the Arizona Strip, River Guides, the book about the Navajo Bridge, it's all out there. And we hope that you enjoy that stuff. We make beans for dinner. And the best thing that we make is we are millionaires in the friends we make, in the authors we work with. And that is lovely. It has just been so rich. So let's talk about oral histories. Suzanne Davis, it's her fault. And Kim Beeson. So I'm working at the clinic and I'm meeting people like Franz Rotter. I don't know, nobody remembers Franz. Who was Franz? Some of you do though. And I started doing oral histories with Franz and Hannah, his wife, and a whole bunch of other people. And I talked to Kim and she said, okay, you need a release form and you need a recorder. And she gave me both of those. So I started doing oral histories, and this is a lot of fun. Oral histories. Sorry, Charlie's barking at me. Can't do that. Oral histories, 2 people talking, 2 empty chairs. Okay? Now, you all saw an oral history yesterday with Todd Seligan and Arnie Richards, and that was great. Nothing wrong with that. It was very scripted. The interviewee is showing a slideshow. Okay, that's helpful for the interviewee to know what he wants to talk about. So that not necessarily something wrong with that. So I'm doing these oral histories, and Suzanne said, you should join the Southwest Oral History Association, so I did that. And that was helpful because Kim Beeson had given me a 30-minute crash course, and then the Southwest Oral History gave me a whole bunch more. Here's kind of how to round it out. And then that was 500 oral histories ago with 170 people, something like that. So I'll slowly open this up. In 2013, I was instrumental in encouraging the Historical Society to start an oral history program. We got a $2,000 budget in 2013, and we have not spent that money yet. We spent some of it, but not all of it. So this is a cheap way to have fun. And, so I'm like, all right, let's talk about it. How to do it, what to do, what's fun, what's not fun, what's work, and what isn't work, what's fun. So that's the deal here, and you've heard it all now. You can leave now. It's fine. Where am I at? I want to know, show of hands, has anyone here in this audience gone to GrandCanyonHistory.org and gone to the symposium, gone to the oral history page and actually listened to one of those oral histories? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, Susie Verkamp, I see your hand back there. Your hand was the first one up. Can you tell me who you listened to and what did you learn in like 30 seconds?
Well, I just read some recently. One that was really fun was Rosie Acosta, and she worked out there with Rotter and just had a wonderful, take on being a working person in the car, and also Suzanne. I loved hers. And then I read an older one. I've been trying to fill in some gaps in my understanding about the 30s, so people that went back a little further, but Rosie's was great.
So Susie's talking about Rosie Acosta, and I met Rosie at the clinic. She died about 6 months after we talked. I go over to the cemetery. She's buried right over there. And I say hello to her, and I put a little stone on her stone. And it's just lovely, a lovely woman. She came to the United States as a German au pair, and she was trapped in this nightmare of an au pair deal for a certain amount of time. And the day she got free from that, she got on a train and went to L.A., and was at the YMCA where they're living there, and saw there was an advertisement for Harvey Girls of Grand Canyon, and that started this incredible life of hers here at the South Rim. Oh, such a wonderful woman. But what you're saying is you're reading them, you're not listening to them, right? You're reading the transcripts, is that right? Done both. Okay, very good. We don't have them all transcribed, and we'll get into transcripts in a bit. So that's the kind of stuff that you can learn about there online. You can download these things as MP3s, and you can listen to them like podcasts while you've got the long drive. So these are just options. Okay. As I go through this talk, if you have a question, I want you to ask. Just raise your hand and say, "Hey, Tom," because I'm looking at my notes here, and just get my attention, and then go for it. Okay, so we went through the history. I want to go through a wonderful paragraph that came from the Bancroft Library Oral History Center in Berkeley, California, University of California. They gave us permission to use this on the oral history page, and the board approved it, so that's all right. But I'm going to go through it because this is really important. I'm going to go through it line by line because it talks about oral histories, and this is going to be a dull talk, I'm sorry. Oral history is a method of collecting historical information through recorded interviews between a narrator with first-hand knowledge of historically significant events and a well-informed interviewer with the goal of preserving substantive additions to the historical record. Wow, what a sentence there. A well-informed interviewer. Now that was enough, reading that, to stop me from ever doing oral histories again. Because I am interviewing people of which I know nothing. I know the landscape a little bit. I know a little history, but the people in these lives, what they've done, oh my gosh, I know nothing. Don't let that wording intimidate you ever from doing an oral history. Save the data, whether you're well informed or not. I'm just going through this, but I read that and I'm like, that's kind of intimidating. Well, what else does it say? Because it is primary material, oral history is not intended to present the final, verified, or complete narrative of events. Note to authors, note to historians, do not do your work solely based on oral histories. That's what this says. You can make some terrible mistakes. Well, that's pretty good. That's all right. Okay. It is a spoken account. It reflects personal opinion offered by the interviewee in response to questioning, and as such, it is partisan, deeply involved, and irreplaceable. Who in this room does not vote? Can you raise your hand if you don't vote? Everybody here, including me, I vote, is partisan. We all see things uniquely through our own understanding of the world. That's one thing that makes oral histories really cool, is because you can learn about people and how they see things. This is really lovely. And that's from the Bancroft. And okay. Very cool. It reflects personal opinion offered by the interviewee. I read this already. I will not repeat it. People ask me about my favorite interviews. They're all my favorite. I'm doing one right now with Alice Talakte. Yeah. I worked with her husband in the clinic before he passed away. Oh my gosh. I saw her in Page, and she's really short. And so I got down. That was so fun. I hadn't seen her in a long time. Give her a hug. I said, hey, would you do oral history? She said, yeah. So she's telling me about being a kid. She was born in a hogan at the top of the cut. Now, when I say the cut, that's Highway 89 going up to Page, goes up through the Navajo Sandstone. There's a big notch there, right? That's called Little Valley. She was born in Little Valley. And when the springs up top would go dry, she would, in bare feet, go down the trail, down through the cliffs there with the goats and the sheep to Bitter Springs for a couple days, and then they would herd them back up. So for fun, she and her brothers and sisters, both elder and junior, they would look for a specific type of pinyon tree. And they would tie a rope on it, and they would pull the branch down. And all these kids are hanging on to this thing, right? And then they would all let go. They all let go, except one of them, who would go for a ride. And she said it was amazing that they didn't lose an eye or break an arm. And it was so much fun. Okay, so that's in oral history that's happening right now. We have done 2, and that's got her just to meeting and marrying Mel. Yeah, that's it. Well, but history is not fun. History is not all fun. History is not all pretty. History does not all smell good. I'm sorry if you think it does, because it doesn't. It's just what it is. Jimmy Yang was a brilliant guy. He was a PhD in chemical engineering, a brilliant man. And when TWA met United in 1956, he died. And he left behind a wife with a young son, and she didn't know she was pregnant with his daughter. So at the kitchen table in Flagstaff, I am crying. I am a grown man, and I am bawling. And so is Etta Yang, his wife, and her son and daughter. There was no post-traumatic stress debriefing back then. She had shock therapy. She had a frontal lobotomy. And she gave this oral history about her life. And I was crying. This is not fun. This is reality. This is history. This is history that needs to be captured. And you can do this. Jim Haggart in his teens was living in Phoenix. Jim Haggart had already, as a young kid, started navigating the landscape in long, distant ways, just using the sun and the stars and a compass if he needed it to figure out the landscape. And he became brilliant in that before he moved to Phoenix. When he was in his teens, he got his backpack. He got a bus to a place called Fredonia up on the Arizona Strip. He got out of the bus, and he said, oh, the Kanab Creek must be over there. And he walked over to Kanab Creek, and he turned downstream and took off. He was going to go to Nankoweap. He got to the Colorado River. He turned left. He went upstream. Now, this was in the spring of a very wet year. Tapeats Creek was cranking. He looked at that and said, I can't get across that. So he went up and around, Crazy Jug. And then he got to Shinnemoo. And he crossed the raging Shinnemoo Creek on a log. He looked and looked and looked and looked for a day and finally found this cottonwood log and went across it without his pack and made it and was thankful and then looked back at his pack. 35 interviews later, Haggart. It took me years to find Bruce Wilson. Listen, I'm not the brightest bulb in this room, okay? And it took me a long time to find this guy, which should have been really easy to find. He had his 13th birthday at Phantom Ranch. The Phantom Ranchers built him a birthday cake with candles. How cool is that? This was in 1942. And he was on a river trip with Norm Nevels and Otis Stock Marston. And he told me some amazing stuff. That just, wow, I didn't even know he was Gay Tidball. Verkamp's Gay Tidball, does that ring a bell? Cameron, Gay Tidball, Cameron. I'm talking to Gay. Her dad got a job for Lorenzo Hubble running a trading post up on the Hopi Mesas. And Gay knew how to play the trumpet. So the Hopi marching band came to her and said, "Would you play with us?" She said, "Ask my dad." Dad said, "Of course." So she's out there on the streets of Flagstaff at the All-Indian Powwow with the Hopi marching band. I mean, this is the stuff you find in oral histories. You just got to go out and do it. Alan Malmquist. Show of hands. Anybody here know Alan Malmquist? Oh, really? So Alan was in the Sierra Club. He met Ansel Adams. He had a 4x5 camera. He drove down the Diamond Creek Road in his tiny little two-wheel drive car. And of course, he couldn't get down to the river. So he walked down there with his 4x5. And there were two fishermen down there. And they ran at him when they saw him. And he thought, "Oh, I'm in trouble. I'm going to die." And they ran up to him. And they were so excited, because they wanted to show him the fish that they'd caught. And this was 1966 or so. You know, I find, "You guys caught some fish. That's nice." They were so excited. They just literally grabbed him and drug him over to show him the fish that they had caught. And they were in the creek. And they were 6 feet long. They had caught 2 pike minnow that probably were juveniles before the Hoover Dam was made. And he didn't have his camera. But Alan ended up working on the Pack It Out thing at Glen Canyon National Recreation Area and did an incredible job with that. He had a pet coyote named Rusty when he was interpreter ranger at Pipe Springs. And then he ended up rebuilding a lot of the buildings at Lee's Ferry. Get in on this stuff. Do you realize how cheap the membership is to be a member of this organization? You need to get in there and get going with this stuff. All right. So that's just some of the stuff that I have learned about. Besides, I mentioned the other day the crane operator on the Navajo Bridge that was afraid of heights. He got out of his truck at the job site and he went, "Uh-oh." So as they started building the first half of the bridge out, and his crane started going out on that bridge, he would go out there in the morning very carefully, and he was tied in, and then he would climb into the cab of his 65-ton crane and shut the door. And he'd be in there all day until he had to go home. After the first half of the bridge was done and he knew he could do it, he relaxed and he had a better time. So anyway, you will learn about failures and successes. You will learn about the good and the bad, and that's history. Remember,